Welcome to the Hayward Boulevard Feasibility Study. We're going to wait just a couple minutes to see if anybody else needs to join us. So you have just the time if you need to go get a glass of water or something before we start. But welcome and thank you for joining us.
Great, we already have 23 people in attendance.
Sounds good.
Great.
So if you want to go to the first slide, we may just kind of overview some of the Zoom protocols while people are sort of waiting. I think most people know how to do this by now, but we can walk through it. So during the presentation, welcome to the virtual meeting for the Hayward Boulevard Feasibility Study. You want to go to the next slide. I just want to walk through with some of the people here how a virtual meeting works if they need to know. So during the presentation, we'll be muting you. There's going to be short presentations so that we don't get a lot of feedback and stuff, so you will be muted. If you have a question during the presentation, you can raise your hand, or we'll also be able to enter questions into the question and answer box. When the presentation ends, we'll then open it up and you can type a question into the question box, or you can raise your hand and we'll call on people and answer them. So anybody have any questions on that, you can also click on the chat button and ask the question, and like if you need to know like how to do something or having a problem. So hopefully, because we really do want you all to be able to participate in this meeting. So with that, next slide, please. So the purpose of this meeting tonight is to share some of the concepts we've come up with for improving the roadway and to solicit your input on those options. The agenda is going to be basically, we'll introduce the team, a brief little overview of the project, because some people, this is sort of haven't been following it this whole way, a summary of some of the project needs, and then introduce some of the concepts, discuss those concepts, and respond to questions and answers. So that's kind of the agenda as we're going to move forward. Next slide. So I'd like the city staff maybe to introduce themselves if you don't mind.
Yes, thank you, Linda. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's community meeting. Thank you for taking the time to attend. My name is Jorge Simbakeba, and I'm a senior transportation engineer in the Transportation Division of Public Works. And I'm the project manager for the Hayward Boulevard Feasibility Study. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing the team that is working on this project, as well as the city staff that's supporting us. From the city, we have on the call Charmin Sola and myself, as well as our Director of Public Works, Director Mary. We also have Kathy Garcia, our Deputy Director of Public Works, and we have Michael Walney and Saki Badi, who are also supporting the project team. From the consulting team, we have Adam Dankberg and Gina Gwen from Kinley Horn, who are handling the design aspects of the study, as well as Linda Gates and Kelly Latoski from Gates and Associates, who are handling the community outreach and public engagement. We have a great presentation for you tonight, and we look forward to hearing your feedback both during the Q&A portion, as well as through the online survey that can be accessed via the project website. And now I'd like to take a little bit of time to give a brief message to our Spanish-speaking community members that may be in attendance. Buenas noches, estimados miembros de la comunidad. Bienvenidos a esta junta comunitaria sobre las mejoras a Hayward Boulevard. Gracias por asistir. Yo estaré disponible para responder cualquier de sus dudas en español al terminar la presentación. Gracias. Next slide, please. Now, I'd like to give a little bit of a background of how we got to this point in the project. Over the years, staff has received several Access Hayward requests and emails from residents concerning the Hayward Boulevard corridor. And as a result, the Hayward Boulevard Safety Improvements Feasibility Study was created to address community concerns that include, but are not limited to, speeding and safety. This study is the evaluation and development of multimodal safety and connectivity improvements along Hayward Boulevard from Campus Drive to Fairview Avenue. The objective of this study is to create a comfortable and safe corridor for pedestrians, bicyclists, transit, and motorists. Thank you, and now I'd like to turn it over to the consultant team.
Linda, you're muted.
Hi. So thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad that you were here. And we're curious about how you found out about this meeting so that we can make sure we use those same kind of communication routes to keep people involved. So there's going to be a quick little poll here, like you find out on a website, a friend or whatever. So click all those that apply and or whatever applies to you. And so we're just curious to see how it goes. So if you could proceed to sort of vote now, that would be fantastic. And Kelly's tracking everybody voting. So you have to vote or we have to keep waiting for you.
I'll give you like 10 more seconds. We've got already 85% of the votes in. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, we go.
So the postcard mailer was worth the investment. A lot of people heard from that. That's great to know. So thank you very much. But a lot of people are hearing from the email from the city. So that's fantastic. I would encourage you to visit the project website. Even after this presentation, there's a lot of information there that you'll probably want to check out after we have our meeting. So,
and our online surveys live.
Oh yeah, well, I haven't done that pitch yet. The conclusion is that you will take an online survey. Next slide. So Adam,
yeah,
you want to walk through this?
Yeah, and so this summarizes the overall project process. Once again, this is the Hayward Boulevard Feasibility Study, which is a study to analyze the opportunities to improve Hayward Boulevard to meet community priorities and needs for this corridor. So we are around the halfway point for this project. We already did a round of community engagement. It was an online survey in the middle of last year. So thank you to the many hundreds of you who participated in that. We have one more round of community engagement that's teed up for a few months from now. And then the final outcome of this project is a final study report where we identify specific improvements that the city can then use to move forward and find funding for and program in their future budget to actually implement in the corridor. So the end outcome of our effort isn't quite shovels in the ground, but it's identifying what improvements are necessary and community supported that the city can then find funding for in advance through design and subsequent efforts. So this isn't the end of the process here by any stretch, certainly not today, certainly not in the next outreach round in a couple months. There's a little ways to go, but it's really important at this stage of the engagement to hear from the community and understand what the priorities are and what the most important items are to include for those future planning and project development efforts. Next slide. So one of the early components of this project was to understand the existing conditions on the corridor. So we did gathered a lot of data. We did a lot of analysis. There's a component where we asked the community, you all, to provide input on existing conditions in the corridor. And there's a few key themes that we identified consistently across those items as areas for improvement or challenges along the corridor. So you can go to the next one. So what we heard a lot from the community, and this was really backed up in the data, was challenges around speed on the corridor. Speeds are very high. What you see in the orangish boxes here is the average speed of vehicles during non-congested times relative to the speed limit. The speed limit is 35 miles an hour for most of the roadway. And so you can see that the average speed on the corridor is well in excess of that, and in some cases over 40 miles an hour. And then the 85th percentile speed, which is often used for planning purposes, is even higher, in some cases more than 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. And so that obviously does relate to a lot of the safety concerns that we heard from the community during the survey process. And some of the factors that may go into that include wide lanes, just a wide roadway, the downhill component to the roadway, the grade that exists there. We also then analyzed the collisions that occur on this corridor over a 5-year period. And we found 17 collisions. And one thing to note here is that there isn't a particular location where there's a major clustering of collisions. The highest number of collisions was actually 3 at Civic Avenue, but all the other locations were less than 3. So there aren't a whole lot of trends in terms of specific problem spots, but what's interesting is that almost half of the collisions were broadside collisions, where one car hits the side of another car. And usually when we see a lot of those, that means it's challenges with people turning on or off the roadway. So a vehicle making a left turn doesn't have a long enough gap and gets hit by a vehicle on the oncoming traffic or Main Street traffic. And so that's really consistent with a lot of the feedback that we heard, is that it is challenging to turn on and off the roadway because of high speeds on the roadway or a lot of vehicles coming at those high speeds at different locations. Next slide. So then the next factor is in terms of pedestrian connectivity. And so we heard a lot from the community and certainly observed ourselves that there's some significant gaps in the sidewalk network along this roadway. So there's areas where there just isn't any sidewalk. You can see in some of the pictures at the bottom of the screen, some of those locations. So there the sidewalk just ends and then it picks up again at a further point. In many of these locations, there's some sort of or ad hoc trails that people have carved through, but it definitely creates a more challenging pedestrian environment, particularly for those with disabilities. And so it is a challenging environment in terms of walking. And so that's something that is an area of noted for improvement with the improvements. Next slide. The corridor is framed by schools on either end. On the western end, it's Cal State University East Bay. On the eastern end, it's Stonebray Elementary School. And that was a common theme in terms of some of the challenges with this corridor. On the western part of the corridor around Cal State East Bay, it's a lot of it is how to get to the school, particularly on foot or on bicycle. There's a large gap in where there's signalized crossings of Hayward Boulevard. And so as a result, we observed a lot of jaywalking activity. Just in the morning period, I think we observed over 30 jaywalkers just to get to the school there. And so that's a product of not having sidewalks, it's a product of not having crossings of the roadway. And so obviously there's some safety concerns associated with it and something to be addressed as part of this project. We did some observations around Stonebray Elementary School. The challenges there are very complex, related to the school configuration and pickup and drop off. We certainly documented a lot of those challenges, but we're noting that solving all the challenges at the elementary school is not a part of the study. That needs to be a separate effort in close coordination with the schools. That is a little bit different than some of the focus of this study along the main boulevard itself. Next slide. And so now I'll turn it back over to Linda Kelly to talk through some of the round 1 outreach responses.
So obviously the team went out and has a bunch of observations about what they thought was happening out there, but they also wanted to find out from you, the community, what you thought some of the issues and opportunities were. So we conducted an online community survey earlier this year. We sent postcards out, which apparently is a good way to get people to find out about posted flyers, set it up on the city's website and such like that. So we had a fairly good response to that. And that was used to sort of help form the prioritization of what kind of improvements we wanted to make. Next slide, Kelly. So the survey took 2 parts. There was an interactive map where people could actually go on and point to specific location where they thought there was a challenge with bicycle, pedestrian, or vehicular issues, and right specifically kind of problems they have. There was a lot of discussion about high-speed vehicles coming downhill, U-turns, left-hand turns at some of these key locations at the East Bay College, at Lewis Park, College Heights, Parkside Drive. There was also some concern about unsafe conditions around Stonebrae Elementary School. So these are just a sampling some of the things we heard. We had 550 participants. We tracked whether it was pedestrians, bicyclists, or drivers who were responding to it. So mostly it was drivers and pedestrians responding. Next slide. In addition to the interactive map, we had some direct questions to find out what people felt the top needs for improvement of the corridor were. And sidewalk obviously came through. A lot of the people wanted to make sure that the sidewalks felt safer, more comfortable, that gaps were closed, that the desire to have a safe pedestrian environment. Many people commented on the auto speeds and how people just drive too fast and controlling that. Wanting to create safe crossings of the street for both bicycle and pedestrians, and also improve the landscaping, the visual appearance of the street. So let me go to the next slide too. So we asked specific questions regarding walking, bicycling, and vehicular. And so here's just showing the walking opportunities. One of the major challenges to walking was no crossing facilities. In all categories, pedestrian, bicycle, and auto, safety was a big concern. So how can we make the street feel safer? There's a lot more detailed information about this survey on the website. I would encourage you to go and check out the website. And while you're there, we're going to be asking you to respond to a second survey about some of the alternatives we're presenting tonight. So yeah, I would encourage you to go there, not only find out the results of the previous survey, but really to check out everything Adam's going to walk with you, and then share with us your thoughts on that, because you are the people who live and use this street. So we really want your insights, because we can't be there 24 hours a day. So we need your help. Next slide.
Okay, great. So then translating what we heard from the community and what we found in our analysis to actual specific priorities for improvements, we flagged a few key items. One was reducing auto speeds. And then here we have some bullets of some strategies that are commonly used to address these particular objectives. So that includes the most effective tool at reducing auto speeds is what we term as reducing the perceived roadway width. So basically how wide the roadway seems to a driver. Does it feel like a highway where they should be traveling fast, or does it feel like a local community residential street where they should be traveling slower? And the way to reduce the perceived roadway width is to add things in the driver's view that are raised items. So things like raised medians, particularly street trees or landscaping, widen out the sidewalk further into the roadway, and basically make the roadway feel narrower, feel more residential, and feel more community oriented. So that's really the most effective way at reducing auto speeds. There are some technology tools like speed feedback signs, which are the little radar signs that flash if you're going too fast. And another really effective tool associated with reducing the perceived roadway width is narrowing the lane width. Usually that goes hand in hand with some of those things like the raised medians and the additional sidewalk, or even lane conversion, where we actually convert a driving lane into another purpose. Second priority is better connecting pedestrian facilities. So this one's pretty straightforward in terms of providing new sidewalks where they don't exist, or widening sidewalks where they're very narrow today. And as I mentioned earlier, a key focus is providing additional crossings in the corridor. There's only 3 places right now where you can actually cross this corridor safely in a marked crosswalk. So providing new opportunities to cross the corridor can be really beneficial for pedestrians and for safety of the corridor. There's a lot of interest in providing bicycle lanes in this corridor, so providing some new bicycle facilities is another strategy that can also help reduce speed. And then finally, the additional streetscape opportunities, which gets to the landscaping interest. So these can be raised medians with landscaping in the middle of the roadway, or it can be landscaping strips on the side of the roadway as well that separate the roadway from the sidewalk. Next slide. So I'll be talking through some of the specifics of the improvements that we have initially identified here And to do so, we've broken the corridor out into 3 segments. The first segment is west of Civic Avenue to the study limit, which is at Campus Drive. The second segment is in the middle between Civic and Farm Hill. And the third segment is to the eastern limit, which is at Fairview. And so I'll be referring to segment 1, 2, and 3 at a couple different points in the coming slides. Next slide. So in terms of the improvements, we have 2 different options for segment 1. And again, that's west of Civic Drive to Campus Drive. Option A is we actually take a travel lane and we put in protected bike lanes, and we'll talk about what this will look like here in a second. But the first option is basically going from a 4-lane roadway to a 2-lane roadway with the center turn lane and protected bike lanes. And then the alternative is we keep the 4 lanes as they are, but we narrow the width of the lanes, just take a couple feet out of the width of the lanes, and then we can squeeze in some unprotected bike lanes on the side of the roadway. For segments 2 and 3, we have a single set of improvements that we'll talk about here in a second. So there aren't options for segment 2 and 3. Obviously, there's always an option of keeping what's out there today, but we have one set of improvement options there. We do have another option or improvement opportunity, and that is to provide traffic circles at Farm Hill Drive and Bailey Ranch Road. So I'll touch on that in a second. There was a third option through the corridor, but we went to the Council Infrastructure Committee back, I think, about a month or 2 ago, and they were more interested in some of the more substantial improvement options. And so we removed that from consideration. But if you're interested in that, you can go back to the CIC meeting information. Next slide. Okay, so the next thing I'll do is walk through some of the improvements that are common to both options and basically throughout the corridor. So these are basically improvements that we have recommended regardless of the option, and just a little more description about what they are. So the image on the left is raised medians or new opportunities for landscaping. We mentioned it doesn't have to be in the median, it can be on the side of the street as well. And so we can get a lot of community input through the process. We're not quite there yet where we are today in the process, but as the project continues, there's a lot of opportunity for community input as far as what the medians or what the landscaping looks like. The image on the right is just talking about narrowing some of the travel lanes in order to fit in some additional amenities on either side of the street, whether it be additional sidewalk or bicycle facilities. Next slide. So on the left here, pretty straightforward in terms of providing continuous sidewalks throughout the corridor, so you can walk from one block to the next throughout the corridor. On the right is improving crossings. So as I mentioned, crossings is a major need for this corridor. And so a common strategy that can be used that doesn't require the installation of a full traffic signal is to use what we call RRFBs, which stands for Rapid Rectangular Flashing Beacons. And that's what's shown in the picture here. I'm sure you've seen those around town. It's the little rectangular lights that kind of flash really quickly when a pedestrian pushes the button. And so what that does, that's been shown through numerous studies to increase driver yielding, which makes it a lot safer and more comfortable to cross the street. And so we have this proposed in Spencer Lane in both options, and at Parkside in one of the options. Next slide, please. And I just saw a question come in about the segment between Civic and Farm Hill, and yes, that is segment 2. Improvements common to both options, continuing on that, protected bike lanes. So the image on the left is what we're talking about when we talk about a protected bike lane. So there's actually a physical barrier between the travel lanes and the bike lane that better protects the cyclists. It's an opportunity to do stormwater treatment. It's an opportunity for landscaping and beautification of the roadway. And it also serves as a really strong protective barrier for cyclists. And these are really effective at getting cyclists of all abilities to feel comfortable riding their bike. With a bike lane, you can often get the really comfortable and confident cyclists who may commute for work every day, but it's a lot more difficult to get the kids and those who are less comfortable on a bicycle. And protected bike lanes have been demonstrated to be really effective at increasing bicycle use of a corridor. On the right is a shared use path picture. And so this is proposed for the eastern portion of the corridor in segment 3 from Farm Hill to Fairview. And so this type of facility is off the street, as you can see in the picture, and it would accommodate both bicyclists and pedestrians on the same wide facility in both directions. And so this is a way, there's an opportunity in this portion of the corridor to provide a really good shared use path with minimal conflicts with vehicles. Next slide, please. A couple more, accessible curb ramps. We've proposed pretty much everywhere they're needed. It's really important to upgrade facilities so that they work for all users. And by providing accessible curb ramps that meet current standards, it can really improve the safety and comfort for everybody. And then on the image on the right, it's improving the bicycle and pedestrian connections to the university. There's a few different strategies on how we would do that, including additional crossings, additional bicycle and pedestrian facilities that directly connect to the university from Hayward Boulevard. Next slide. Okay, so now I'll focus a little bit on each of the segments. So segment 1, this is between campus and Civic. And so this is what it looks like today. There's 4 traffic lanes and a center turn lane. So the center turn lane can be used to make left turns on and off the corridor, or it's just like a striped open asphalt area. So you go to the next one. So now these are the 2 options and how they relate to existing. And so with option A, that's where we do the lane conversion. So instead of 4 lanes with a center turn lane, it would be 2 lanes that would also have either a median or a center turn lane. And then we use the extra space to provide a bicycle lane with a raised buffer that would protect the bicycle lane. There's also an opportunity to provide a sidewalk that's separated from the roadway with a nice landscape strip, like we saw in some of the images. And so that sidewalk would be continuous for this segment of the corridor. So in option B, we have all the same number of drive lanes as we do today, but then we squeeze the width of those lanes to provide bicycle lanes on each side of the roadway. So the lanes are still wide enough to handle trucks and cars and buses and everybody else who use the roadway. They just won't be as wide as they are today. And then there's, as a result of squeezing everything in, there isn't really that room to widen the sidewalks to put in the planting strip, the nice landscape planting strip like we have in option A. Next slide. So in terms of some pros and cons for each of these, one of the several of the improvements associated with option A, which again is the lane conversion, by reducing the number of lanes, that inherently will reduce the vehicle speeds on the corridor. It's a narrower perceived roadway. It seems more like a community street. It allows for protected bike lanes to encourage use of the bike facilities by all types of bicycle users. So it applies for all ages and abilities, bicycle facility. And the last bullet is a really key one. Because the roadway is so wide today, there's no safe way of providing a new pedestrian crossing between Civic and campus. But if we reduce the number of lanes on the roadway and provide space for that median, we can provide a new pedestrian crossing there that can be safe and comfortable for all users. And so with this option A, we would have a new pedestrian crossing at Parkside Drive that would help access Cal State East Bay. Of course, the drawback is there would be fewer lanes of traffic. And so we have done traffic analysis. We showed that the travel times, the impact to travel times for autos would be very minimal, but it would be a few second increase on the order of 5 to 10 second increase for drivers. Next slide. So option B still provides some benefits. It does provide a dedicated space for cyclists. It doesn't have any sort of impact to the auto capacity of the roadway. It does narrow lane widths. But by maintaining the same wide curb-to-curb kind of asphalt area for the roadway, it's going to have less of a benefit in terms of reducing vehicle speeds. And also because of the large nature of the roadway and the higher speeds in the corridor, the bicycle lanes are going to be more fit for the strong and fearless cyclists as opposed to the all ages and abilities cyclists. And because the roadway still ends up being pretty wide, we would not be able to comfortably provide a new pedestrian crossing in this segment. Next slide, please. Okay, segment 2. So this is between Civic Avenue and Farm Hill. And so I mentioned, as I mentioned, we only have one option here. Basically, what we've analyzed is that traffic volumes really drop off substantially east of Civic. So the volumes on the eastern portion of the corridor are actually less than half of what they are on the western portion of the corridor. And so we feel very comfortable proposing the lane conversion starting in segment 2 as that being the only option, improvement option here. And so with that, we would convert a drive lane to the bicycle lane with a raised buffer. And that would protect the cyclist lane. There's also an opportunity for continuous sidewalks with landscape strips on both sides of the roadway and to provide a continuous and very comfortable pedestrian facility. There are some portions, the roadway cross section does vary in some small portions of the corridor. There's some parking and along the corridor in front of the church and things like that that would be accommodated with the proposed improvements as well. So we would not have the parking loss in that stretch of the roadway. Next slide. And then finally, segment 3, this is the eastern portion of the corridor. So today it's already only 1 lane in each direction with a sidewalk in portions on one side. Again, the cross section here does vary different points in the corridor. There's sidewalks on both sides by the park, for example. But we're showing the western portion that's a little bit just east of Farm Hill. And so with this, the proposed improvement would be to provide a 2-way shared use path on one side of the roadway that would allow for a continuous bicycle and pedestrian facility all the way between Fairview Avenue and Campus Drive. So it'd be a continuous bicycle facility that's comfortable the whole way. We can do this by avoiding any impacts to drive lane. We basically just better utilize the existing right-of-way that's already there. So no new right-of-way is needed. It's just better organizing the right-of-way that's there today to provide the shared use path. Next slide. Okay, so now, as I mentioned, one of the additional choices that we're really looking for some community input on is on whether to provide traffic circles at, in particular, 2 locations, one at Farm Hill and one at Bailey Ranch. And we picked these particular locations because there is a higher amount of side street traffic, so vehicles turning on or off of Farm Hill and Bailey Ranch. And there is available right away in this area to place a traffic circle. Traffic circles can take up a little bit more room because we have to put that circle in the middle of the roadway. And so it can only be implemented in certain locations where there is that room available. And so we picked these 2 locations because there's an opportunity to provide some traffic calming to slow vehicles down, an opportunity to improve access to and from Hayward Boulevard at these locations. So today there is no control on Hayward Boulevard. Cars can just keep proceeding, and cars on the side streets have a stop and wait for a gap in traffic. So with a roundabout or a traffic circle here, basically the vehicles would be a continuous flow thing. And so I'm sure many of you have experienced roundabouts or traffic circles driving around the Bay Area. And so it would allow for easier turning movements onto and off of the side streets. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, there's benefits for getting on and off of the corridor. It does inherently slow vehicles down on Hayward Boulevard, making it less of a kind of a throughway where you zip down the hill and requiring vehicles to yield as they enter the roundabout. There also is an opportunity to provide some landscaping in the middle of the roundabouts or the traffic circles. Drawbacks, there would be, of course, as we're slowing vehicles down, there's inherently some additional delay that would be experienced by autos. And then the other challenge is just in building the traffic circles. They do cost a decent amount of money to construct and take a little bit longer to construct. And so that is just an additional trade-off associated with this type of improvement. Next slide. So we have, we've really kind of summarized the improvements proposed for the purposes of this presentation. There's a lot of details about specific locations of improvements and even more information about the types of improvements located in some graphics that we have available on the website. The website link is down at the bottom of the screen. Also, if you just type in Hayward Boulevard Corridor Study in Google, I think it's the first thing that pops up too. So it's pretty easy to get here. At the bottom of the page, there's some links to some project documents. And so you can click on Alternative A and Alternative B and see a lot of detail about some of the specific improvements, including additional cross sections and specifics about what's happening in each individual part of the corridor. So if you're really interested in learning more, I encourage you to go on the website and check this out. Next slide. So then finally, to wrap up the improvements discussion, there's kind of circling back on if we're able to implement all or many of these improvements, what do we achieve? We achieve improved safety for all users by slowing vehicles down, by making it easier to turn on and off the corridor, by providing additional bicycle and pedestrian facilities. We're able to provide connected and comfortable bicycle and pedestrian facilities to encourage trips made within the neighborhood to be on foot or on bike. And it also does provide opportunities for aesthetic enhancements through additional landscaping and pavement treatments at the various intersections and along the segments as we create room for medians and landscape strips. Next slide. So then in terms of where we go from here in this project, we're really excited about getting community input over the course of April and really encourage you to take the survey which we'll be talking about a little bit more here in a second, but definitely really appreciate community input through this process. That's really what's going to drive what's going to happen next on this project. So then based on that input, we'll select preferred options. We'll further refine the improvements. We'll refine our cost estimates, figure out what we'll build first in what order. And then we'll go back to the Council Infrastructure Committee with an update in a few months. Following that committee meeting, we'll come back to this community to report back on what we heard and where the priorities for the corridor can be, and get final input from the community on where the city should focus first on this project. And then we wrap up our work with the study report and council presentation before the end of the year. The website is listed again here at the bottom of the page. So I think with that, I'm turning it back over to Linda. I'm mute again, Linda.
Keep doing that. So as you can anticipate, our big ask here is that we'd like you to go to the website and take the round 2 community survey regarding these alternatives and the options there. It's available in both Spanish and English, and it's open for the next 2 weeks. It's open now and it'll be up for the next 2 weeks. So please encourage your neighbors, your friends. This is how the will of the community is what the council listens to when they decide what projects to proceed forward. So it's very important that you participate in the survey and get others to participate in the survey. Now, Adam, while you were speaking, a number of questions came in. And so I'm going to walk through those and we'll share those. We also had a few questions mailed in to us prior to this meeting. We'll also be discussing those and bringing those up. But so the first question is from Karen Wilson, the property manager for University Hill HOA. She has a long frontage along Hayward Boulevard. They're planning some landscaping and want to know who we would work with to be sure the plans match up.
I'll go ahead and take that one, Linda.
Yeah, I think you should probably.
Yeah, thank you, Karen, for the comment, question. That would be myself and Sharman. We'll work with you to make sure that your plans for the landscaping match up with whatever alternatives we decide to, and the community decides to move forward with along. Thank you.
This one is for you, actually, Adam. Valerie Anderson wanted to know if we considered a traffic circle at existing lights such as Tribune Avenue.
Yeah, we have taken a look at those locations. As I mentioned, the challenge with traffic circles is fitting everything in within the available right of way. We certainly don't want to have to go and buy up people's homes or backyards in order to build a project. And so that's one of the challenges with traffic circles, is they just take up a little bit more space at the corners. And so that's why we're really focusing on Bailey Ranch and Farm Hill, because we think the traffic circles work there without having to acquire additional right of way.
So here's another one. The reason car speed reduction is being considered is just because of community input or because of the 3 collisions a year. In other words, are there objective traffic engineering parameters that suggest speed reduction is advisable? How does this area compare in terms of collisions against Hayward's median?
Yeah, I can take the first part or you want to take the second part?
Yeah.
So in terms of the reason for speed reduction, certainly the community input is a big part of what's driving this, but that does show up in the data. The speed data that we collected showing speeds well in excess of the speed limit is something of great concern that the city would like to address. There's no question that reducing vehicle speeds improves safety. When collisions occur, they're less likely to cause injuries. There's fewer collisions that occur when speeds are lower. So there's definitely a close safety tie between reducing speeds and improving safety. And the fact that the speeds are so high in this corridor definitely encourages the need for traffic calming type strategies.
So another question, why can't a pedestrian bridge be built over Hayward Boulevard near the campus?
So
Yeah,
I'll
no,
go
that's-
ahead. I'll go ahead and take that one. Yes. So we have that's something that we can evaluate. However, it's been shown that pedestrian bridges are usually not utilized very often, and it actually has cost in different locations to folks for jaywalking across the roadway. It does open also opportunities for vandalism of the structures as well. So it's something that can be looked at, but it may not most likely be appropriate here.
Yeah, and I'll just have the ramping necessary for those raised crossings. Just think we have to get people up to the top and then across the roadway. And so that requires a lot of space, which is challenging to come by. It has a lot of cost. And because it requires people to zigzag their way up these ramps, that's where a lot of times pedestrians don't use them because it's just a lot faster to run across the street. And so there's kind of limited applications where pedestrian bridges are actually effective and worth the very significant costs that they entail.
So you said reducing the road from 2 lanes to 1 lane would only lose 5 to 10 seconds. But what if you're behind a slow moving truck going uphill?
Yeah, and I mean, the 5 to 10 seconds is an average. There certainly are experiences where if you're behind that truck, it's going to be more than 5 to 10 seconds on average. There's no doubt about that. But the 5 to 10 seconds is an average. There's going to be many times a day where going from 2 lanes to 1 lane isn't going to impact you at all because there just isn't that much traffic out on the roadway. So yeah, I think we definitely want to note that by doing the lane conversion, there's a chance it may take you longer to drive the street. And we want to note the benefits of the lane conversion in terms of the bicycle and pedestrian safety and auto safety improvements, and really open up the community to provide input on what they'd like to see.
So William would like to know, hang on a second, somebody added a question, so it slipped away from me. Okay, William's lived here for 20 years. No one rides bikes at the 1,100 feet between Mission and Fairview. I challenge any one of you to do that ride in 3.5 miles or so.
Yeah, and
Thank you. William, thank you. No, we appreciate the comment. It's something that it's a topic of debate for sure, because I assume many of the folks that are not riding are choosing not to ride because they don't feel safe making that ride. And that's one of the things that we are trying to accomplish with the improvements and making the facility safe for all users.
So Jeanette wants to know, how can there be enough room for a correctly sized traffic circle at Bailey Ranch? Why can't a light be installed there?
Yeah, so at Bailey Ranch, there's a very wide median there. And so that creates enough space to allow us to place a traffic circle in that area without needing to acquire any right of way. In terms of why a light can't be installed there, so there are traffic warrants that are required by statute that in order to install a traffic signal. So there has to be a certain level of traffic volume. There's collision warrants, there's traffic volume warrants. And so you have to meet one of those warrants in order for a traffic signal to be installed. And the traffic volumes of Bailey Ranch Road are not high enough to meet those warrants. So it's not really an option to do a traffic signal. You know, we could certainly keep the existing configuration that's out there today. And we provide the roundabout as an option for modifying it.
So we have a couple of comments here. One person is saying they agree there are too many issues around the university. And we have a bicyclist here. He says, before the pandemic, I used to commute every single day by bicycle to the Amtrak station and then to Santa Clara from Farm Hill Drive. For this reason, I know very well that given the substantial slope, only a few people can cycle up and down Hayward Boulevard. A person needs to be a dedicated bicycle rider. What kind of study has been done to estimate the number of people that will use the bike lanes?
So I'll kick this one off. There hasn't been a specific analysis to estimate the number of folks that will be using a new facility. However, when a protected bike lane is created in a specific location, it does give folks the ability to ride those folks that are not, trained cyclists or commuters. A protected bike lane allows folks that are less experienced bicycle riders to feel safer and to be safer within the bicycle facility.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, yes, it is a substantial slope down to Mission, but also we would anticipate that there would be bicycle activity just within this part of the corridor. People commuting via bicycle to Cal State East Bay, or commuting to Stonebray Elementary, or just going to visit a friends or a neighbors. So yeah, we might get some people who are willing to do the trek up and down the hill, but then we also hope to encourage kids and other residents in the corridor to use their cyclists to get around the neighborhood.
So Greg Gills is sharing a comment. Why only one option from Civic to Farm Hill? Reduced to 2 lanes, unacceptable. Traffic circle at Barn Rock, much better than Bailey Ranch. And then William Wood has noted comment, the whole point is slowing down the Stonebray crowd and road dieting. You approve Stonebray, now you complain about the drivers. But Susan would like to know, I would like to ask what you plan for parking at Lewis Park. Right now, people park alongside the roadside.
Yeah, so this project would not modify that. So we would still maintain parking along the park as it is today. So as part of this project, there'd be no change to that.
Why no sidewalk on one side of the road between University and Civic? Yeah,
and that was just a sort of an artifact of where we put that particular cross section. So if you look at the website and in greater detail, you'll see that there is a sidewalk on portions of that segment. Just adjacent to the university, there is no sidewalk today. The sidewalk's essentially on the university side of the street, as opposed to in the city side of the street. So essentially, what we would do as part of this project is improve the connection between the sidewalk on Hayward Boulevard and the sidewalk that runs within the university right of way. And so in the stretch where the sidewalk's on the university property, there would not be an additional sidewalk on Hayward Boulevard. So it's still a continuous sidewalk facility on both sides of Hayward. It's just a matter of semantics in terms of that particular cross section.
So Matthew's wondering if any studies have been performed regarding emergency evacuation in the event of wildfires or earthquakes. More houses are being built, and it would seem any reduction in available lanes for cars would significantly raise risk and potentially cost lives.
Yes, I'll get this one kicked off. Thank you, Matthew. There is currently work by the fire department on developing an updated version of the citywide evacuation plan. And we're working hand in hand with them to have this plan and these alternatives reviewed, as well as identifying and helping them identify which routes to utilize in a scenario of an emergency. In terms of fire, I'd like to add that having the Fire Station 5 there at the top of the hill on Skyline Drive is very beneficial and helpful for this project.
So Gordon wonders, he's seen a lot of cars ignore the red light and just pass on Tribune Avenue. And he's wondering if cameras help that.
So typically our experience is that cameras are beneficial, but there are other alternatives to having that and to be a deterrent of speeding and red light violations. So we will be looking at other technologies to implement as part of the project.
And Rose just wanted to comment that the traffic circle by Farm Hill would definitely stop cars racing and stop the donuts. And you have a number of people who are commenting on bikes. Robert says, I've done that bike ride, but often take side streets because I don't feel safe on Hayward Boulevard. I will ride on the sidewalk from Farm Hill to Bailey Ranch Road. And I'm going to skip down to some questions. Does a traffic circle also include a stop sign? It seems like traffic circle is good, but not when there's also a stop sign.
That is correct. Typically traffic circles do not include stop signs. I believe Charmin can jump in and help to answer this one, as what was done in Fairview was done as, with a response to the community. Usually traffic circles and roundabouts are new for community members and difficult to navigate. So it's interesting. It takes time for adoption.
And just to add, sorry, traffic circles require less space than roundabouts. And because of the smaller space for the traffic circles, oftentimes the stop signs are needed. Roundabouts don't have stop signs, but a lot more space would be needed, approximately 150 feet in diameter. And we don't have that much room at that location.
Mary wanted to plead to not reduce from 2 lanes to 1 on the upper part of Hayward Boulevard. She's concerned about access from her street. We'll experience a lot of overflow traffic and impatient drivers. All the questions and comments people have in here are also being recorded and being provided to the design team. Paul wants to know, with a planting strip and a single lane, how do you plan for emergency vehicles?
Yeah, and we would make sure the design is wide enough to meet fire department standards. So usually it's a 20-foot clear width to allow a fire truck and another vehicle to be provided in the roadway. So we would certainly closely coordinate with the fire department to make sure that all their standards are met for safe emergency vehicle use and evacuations.
Yeah, there's been a number of people that have brought that up as a comment. Greg also wanted to know, I think we missed it. Is there any possibility of doing a stop sign at the fire station and Barn Rock?
There is a stop sign at Barn Rock.
You say it's normally ignored. Oh, Greg is saying they're normally ignored. He's like, how do we get people to follow the rules?
Yeah, so one of the improvements I didn't really touch on because it was getting fairly specific, but it is flagged in the improvements note on the website, is we are proposing a raised crosswalk at Barn Rock. So what that does is you actually slightly raise the crosswalk itself, just a few inches, but it results in a very different perception for the driver. It really makes the pedestrian more visible and more of a priority. And so that may also help address some of those concerns raised.
Has there been discussion about the traffic jam during pickup and drop off at Stonebray Elementary School and how these improvements will impact that?
There has been, and as Adam mentioned, as part of the existing conditions analysis, there was data that collected of the operations that occur over there at Stonebray Elementary. It is not part of the scope of this project, but it's something that will be looked at as we move forward.
Have you considered adding a traffic light in segment 1?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've looked at improvements of that nature. I think we'd have to look at the data again. Again, I think the concern would be about meeting the traffic signal warrants. And I believe it would be unlikely to meet warrants, but that's something we can check on again if there's interest.
And Bridget and Jeanette sort of had related questions. Bridget wanted to know, are speed bumps an option instead of traffic circles? And Jeanette wanted to know, what's the difference between a traffic circle and a roundabout? So maybe those can be put together.
Speed bumps would not be typically considered for a roadway like this. The speed limit for the majority of the roadway is 35 miles an hour. There's a lot of there's buses, or at least there were AC transit buses on the corridor. There's a fire station up at the top of the corridor. So speed bumps are generally more appropriate on residential streets with slower speeds and less large vehicle activity. So that's not something that we've considered here. In terms of the difference,
slope as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's a very good point, Sherman. Yes, with the slope of the roadway. In terms of the difference between a traffic circle and a roundabout, I think Sherman did a great job discussing that earlier, but basically a traffic circle is a much smaller version of a roundabout. So Fairview is pretty large. That's really a full roundabout configuration. Traffic circle is going to be a much smaller circle in the middle, so it takes up less space. And as a result, there's a little bit more flexibility in terms of the control, whether it's a yield or it's a stop sign or how we configure the sidewalks around it. So there's a lot of similarities between a traffic circle and a roundabout. There's just a little bit more flexibility in design in order to fit it in a smaller space for a traffic circle. Jorge or Sharman, anything else to add on that one?
Stefan wants to make sure we're explicitly gathering data in the survey about the community's view on fire safety. Is there an opportunity to gather data on that with the lane reduction?
And that is something that we looked at in the survey itself. We're not explicitly asking the question, but we are giving the community the opportunity to bring that as their feedback and questions in the current survey.
And Paul just wanted us to look at the existing design from Firehouse to Stone Gray. He feels the planted median strip doesn't allow safe shoulder for cars to pull over for emergency vehicles. And Stefan commented, in looking at the traffic circle at Bailey Ranch Road, are you considering the impact that the traffic congestion at Stone Gray Elementary School would have on the operation of that traffic circle? And I think these are just comments, but we did have a couple of write-ins before this meeting. One was, will you consider renaming Hayward Boulevard to something more appropriate, like Hayward Hills Drive or Hayward Hills Boulevard?
I'll go ahead and take that question. That's not something that we are looking at in the scope of this project. It's something that would need to be brought up to council and the infrastructure committee and other decision makers in the city.
And will you consider involving Cal State art students in a landscape mural on the big expansive concrete wall on the west side near the top?
That is a good suggestion, and it's something that's been brought up at other council and infrastructure committee meetings about other infrastructure projects, and any opportunities that we have with this project to include the community in aspects such as this, we will take that opportunity, yes.
And then finally, it says, do you really think there's enough bicycle traffic to warrant bike lanes? Please look at Patrick Avenue as a one-lane thoroughfare to Tennyson and I-880 post-COVID. Hayward Boulevard has traffic at peak hours to access I-580 and I-680. We see a bicycle maybe every 2 weeks on our way to Stone Gray Country Club.
So to answer that, and as I mentioned earlier, it's difficult to estimate the amount of folks that will be utilizing a future facility. However, the objective of the project and projects such as these and these types of improvements is to improve the safety for all users of the road and for all modes, and to balance the roadway for all users. As Adam mentioned, protected bike lanes do allow users that are not typically experienced bicycle riders to feel more comfortable and safer using those facilities. So over time, there is an expectation that more folks will be using the facility, and the facility will be safer for all.
And I was just going to say, so we did actually collect bike activity data before COVID on the corridor, and it's certainly not a lot of bike activity, but given that there aren't any bike lanes out there today, for example, by Bailey Ranch Road in one direction in 1 hour, there's 11 cyclists moving westbound towards Bailey Ranch Road on Hayward Boulevard. And so, given the lack of lanes out there, that's a decent amount of activity. It's difficult to project what that 11 will go to with the provision of a better facility. But there is some demand out there. We expect that additional users will come with the proper facility.
And we have one question about the sidewalk on segment 1. Currently, there's no continuous sidewalk on one side. Will a sidewalk be put in to fill the gaps?
Yes.
We also have some participants with their hand raised.
Okay. You wanna call-
Stephen, if you want to go first, and then Linda, Maggie, you can be on deck. Stefan, if you still wanted to speak, you're able to unmute.
Can you mention how to unmute?
There is okay. On your screen at the bottom left corner, there is an arrow or an
Microphone.
oval. It shows actually Stefan is unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my computer had selected the wrong microphone. So I'd spoken to Jorge earlier about concerns about fire safety. This is a major evacuation route for people up on the hill. And I'm concerned that some of the things that we're seeing here will reduce the speed with which people can be evacuated from up on top of the hill in case of a wildfire danger. You know, are you conditioning some of your decisions here on input from the Hayward Fire Department or other fire safety experts?
Yes, yes. We're working hand in hand with the fire department about this specific project, and also they are working on updating their citywide evacuation plan. So we will be addressing that, and we will be following their suggestions and their requirements for the evacuation routes.
In terms of that, will we be looking at possible compromises that would, you know, achieve more than just the bare minimum that is maybe perhaps legally required?
In terms of
Fire
like
safety
minimal, okay. It's something that we would be discussing with the fire department. We want to make sure that our improvements are appropriate and follow the requirements of the fire department.
If members of the community want to give you input on their concerns about fire safety, is there a way to do it other than using your other box on your survey?
There, you can, members of the community can contact, we have a phone number and a specific email address that we are compiling all feedback for this specific project. And that is displayed on the presentation here as well as on the project website. And we'll gather all the feedback there, and we will take it into account and evaluate and share it with the design team and with the fire department.
Where is the email?
Linda, could you go to that slide? I think it's the next slide.
Yeah, go to the next slide. Yes, there you go.
Oh, that's a project. Let me give you I'll write it down. I'll say it here. It is Hayward Boulevard feedback at hayward-ca.gov.
Hayward Boulevard feedback. Is that all one word?
Yes, it's all together, and it's BLVD.
BLVD. At what was the domain name?
Hayward-California.ca.gov.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Linda, and Natalie, you will be after Linda. If you're still there, Linda, you can unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm in agreement with all the people who have brought up the fire safety issue and exit, but we also have a major earthquake fault that runs not only along the Mission Corridor up across 2nd Street. This is going to limit the ability of people in the Hayward Hills to exit. So our only real exit will be up to Fairview. We not only have the communities that are up here now, but we have Cal State Hayward. So we've narrowed streets on Fairview. So narrowing the streets on Hayward Boulevard are greatly going to decrease how the number of people can get out of here and safely. We've seen it in Paradise, we've seen it in the Oakland Hills, and we've seen it in Santa Rosa. And I think that these issues have not been addressed, and those should be the primary issues that are of concern. We have, I think it's 2.5 cars per household. And when you allow Prominence, Bailey, and Stonebrae to be built, this greatly increased the risk of getting out of here. You've seen the problem at Stonebrae for the elementary school. Parents park in the roundabouts. Well, if you think that's a mess, what do you think it's going to be when all these people have 2 lanes to exit into? That's how are you going to make plans for that? Plus, you have not increased the number of fire stations, even though you've doubled the number of residents up in this area. So what plans are you going to make for that?
So specific to this project, we really appreciate the feedback. As I mentioned earlier, we're working with the fire department to make sure that what we propose in this project meets their requirements and the requirements of an evacuation during an emergency. We have a long ways to go, and part of this project is to get feedback like the one you're bringing up now, and we really appreciate it early and often. And we will share that with the rest of the team and the city.
Okay, thank you, Linda. If you're finished with your comments, Natalie, you are on deck. You want to unmute yourself?
You know what the comment was? They're working with the fire department. I said,
there we are. Here we are. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I agree with the prior caller in reference to reducing the lanes from 2 to 1 or from 4 to 2. And I question the bicyclists. Let me preface this by saying that my husband and I were competitive runners for 35 years. So we know what it takes in energy and muscles and all of that stuff to do the things that we do. And I challenge you to try to bicycle from College Heights, where we live, up to Stonebrae Elementary. It is a very steep grade, and I would suggest that it would take nearly an elite bicyclist to do that. It's not just a walk in the park. And I just don't see how, I mean, I love bicyclers. Gosh, they're in my family, but I cannot see reducing the lanes at all, especially at the jeopardy of the exits and egresses that we must make in times of emergency. And believe me, there is more traffic than those of you who don't live up here imagine at certain points, especially when you're at a stoplight at a Civic and Hayward Boulevard and you get backed up, and then you proceed and there's all kinds of traffic. I don't know how this survey was conducted, but I definitely oppose reducing Hayward Boulevard from 2 lanes to 1 in either direction. And so I like your comment about the musculature of bicyclists who would be using this corridor on a regular basis or even an irregular basis.
Thank you for your comment. We appreciate the feedback. It's stuff we are taking into account. It's why we're having this meeting. We want to hear everyone what they think and what they want to see for Hayward Boulevard, because Hayward Boulevard is yours. And we will share your comments with the team. I can't comment about the musculature that is needed to ride up the hill. However, there are other options as well, with the surgeons of e-bikes and things of that nature that can help when riding bicycles uphill.
Do we have any more hands raised there, Kelly?
We do. Robert, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I could comment on the bicyclist because I am an avid bicyclist, but I'm certainly not an elite bike rider. I'm 58 years old, and I actually bike these roads a couple times a week. It's a nice exercise for me, get the cardio. So I do about an hour ride. I live about halfway up the hill. I bike down to the university. I come up on the side streets, old Hayward Highlands, and then I'll get on the sidewalk because I don't feel safe on the road. There's no bike lanes, and it seems like there's plenty of room for it, but I will bike on the sidewalk up past Farm Hill, all the way up to Stonebray, and then I'll come down through Garin Park. So I use it quite a bit. And if there are bike lanes painted, I would feel safer riding on them. I don't think you need to narrow the road from 2 lanes to 1 in order to fit that bike lane in. I know that was one of the suggestions you had. You wouldn't have a physical barrier. I mean, I'm just responding to one person that thinks you have to be an elite cyclist. My wife did get an e-bike, so she's able to keep up with me now. And I think a lot of people are starting to do that now. So I think you would see more bicyclists if you did have bike lanes for them to ride on.
Thank you.
Kelly, do we have anybody else with their hand raised?
Lower hand.
No one right now, but we have a few more questions that have been typed in.
Yes, we have several questions that are really a little more statements. One is, do you have more substantial data regarding bike use, actual numbers over a longer period of time?
So I believe the data that we've collected for this study is what Adam mentioned before. It was the pre-COVID data collection go ahead, Adam. What was the time period?
Yeah, so we collected weekday and weekend volumes. Bike volumes were certainly higher on the weekend than on the weekday, probably more consistent with recreational riders. But we basically collected peak hour data at a handful of intersections on weekdays and weekends.
So
I just want to add one thing we did notice, however, after COVID started, we saw an increase in the people biking on Mission Boulevard. And that's where, at the sections where we did install the protected bike lanes. And that was a pretty significant increase. So we do expect people to be biking more now than they did pre-COVID.
So there are a number of comments reiterating their concern about evacuation and lane reduction impact. But we have one question. I believe AC Transit has suspended bus service on Hayward Boulevard during the pandemic. Does the study plan assume that the service will be restored?
Yes, the analysis being done and the proposals of the alternatives that are being shown do take into account that AC Transit would be functioning along the corridor.
So, and a number of people have asked if this is being recorded and they'll be able to access. And yes, it is being recorded, and we will share on the website this meeting for other people who may be taking the survey without the benefit of having the presentation and the discussion. So you'll be able to refer to that, as I am sure the design team will be referring to it. I think you've given us a lot of food for thought.
We have 2 people with their hands raised.
Perfect.
Okay, Paul, and then Natalie, you can go next. Go ahead and
There, am I unmute?
Yes. We can
Okay,
hear you.
I just wish there was more time taken with the Stonebray problem. Learn from the mistakes that have been made there by the city of Hayward. It's dangerous. Any school day or a rainy day, there is absolutely no way safety responders can get through the traffic. There's no pullover. Oh, there's maybe a small 12-foot area for a gardener to pull his truck over or something, but it looks like history's going to repeat itself the way you guys are going right now, and it really concerns me. But that's all I got to say.
Thank you. That's something that we will look at.
I hope so.
The project.
And I was just going to note that the configuration proposed. Oh, sorry. Sure.
I was just going to say, we do have a separate study looking into the drop-off pickup situation at Stonebray Elementary.
But it's connected. The problem you guys have created there already, you're trying to repeat that down in the western end.
The challenge with Stonebray Elementary was that after its opening, the school district allowed them to double their enrollment rate. And so now that's something we're trying to mitigate with our new studies.
I'm a retired teacher there. I know that's not the reason. It was a design that was forced upon them by the city of Hayward. And the city of Hayward has got to acknowledge that problem and solve it at the top and not repeat the same thing down on the western end.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Okay, next person, Natalie, and then we have Septinder and Stephen again. Natalie, if you want to unmute.
Okay, here we go. Well, I agree again with the prior caller. I just want to address the guy that takes his bicycle up there fairly often and thinks that it doesn't take too much energy to do that. He is essentially, in a sailing term, tacking when he goes off on the side streets and then comes back on Hayward Boulevard and then goes off on some more side streets and so forth. And that is essentially not appreciating the very steep grade that it is between College Heights and Stonebray Elementary. And so I'm sorry. And if your wife has an e-bike and you bring her along once a month, that's great. But to allow a bike lane for a very few people and diminish the access and the egress that we need so desperately on the hill from 4 lanes to 2 lanes is ludicrous. I'm sorry to say. End of comment.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
So we had one question come in. How will this project impact traffic flows in and out of CSU East Bay during the week? Students and staff are expected to return to campus in the fall.
Yeah.
So Adam, go ahead. Yeah, I believe the data that was collected was when school wasn't, CSU was in session.
Yeah, that's correct. So our analysis doesn't take into account the university. Also, I'll note that the modifications are east of the university, and so the access points for the university are not affected.
And Jeanette wanted to know, when a bus is stopped at the stop between Barn Rock and Stonebray, how will traffic get by? How will they pass?
So there's not a modification to the way the road is configured past Barn Rock. Basically, all we're doing there is modifying the sidewalk area to make that a larger shared use path. I did also want to clarify that the configuration that exists today between Barn Rock and Stonebray is not what's proposed in the western portion of the corridor. In the western portion of the corridor, we have a center turn lane proposed through most segments that would allow for basically a center turn lane. So it's not the 12-foot wide roadbed that exists in the eastern portion of the corridor. So I just wanted to clarify that we're not replicating what's east of Barn Rock. It would look and feel somewhat different.
Someone wanted to know what the percentage of traffic from Cal State goes uphill or downhill. Do we know?
We would have to look at the data that was collected back before COVID to answer that question. We can answer that question and post answers online on the project website. I think that's something that we will be doing with some of the questions that we don't get to as we're running low on time.
Yes, I think
We have two people with their hand raised right now. Satinder, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly.
You are. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Satinder Malhi. I'm the Associate Director for Government and Community Relations at Cal State East Bay. And if I may, I just wanted to follow up on the question that I put in the chat. So Adam, to your earlier response there, just so we're absolutely clear, are you stating here that this project will in no way, shape, or form impact the access to the campus, either getting in or getting out of the campus?
The goal of the project would be to provide additional pedestrian bicycle connections to the campus. In terms of autos, the auto access to the campus is primarily either from was it Harder or Carlos B.
Okay.
And so all the improvements that we have proposed on this corridor are to the east of that. So in terms of connecting between like Mission and the university, there'd be no effect for autos.
Okay, so no impact from Mission. I mean, coming up Carlos B off of Mission, but what about from there to Campus Drive?
Yeah, correct. Nothing west of Campus Drive. There are no modifications west of Campus Drive.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Stefan, you would like to unmute?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, very good. I have a question about your study for the traffic circle at Bailey Ranch Road. Are you considering the interaction of the congestion at from Stonebrae in the mornings where the traffic backs up past Bailey Ranch Road down the hill as people try to unload their children? You know, it seems to me that a traffic circle there would just fill up with people going up the hill and completely block the people trying to leave Bailey Ranch Road.
Yeah, I think that's something that we would further analyze as we, evaluate the potential for the traffic circle in this area. We have done extensive field observations and have observed a lot of the queuing that everybody talks about pre-COVID associated with the school. So that is a factor for the traffic circle.
I'm particularly concerned because you're excluding the Stonebrae congestion from the study, and it seems like it would be easy to not deal with that problem.
Well, yeah, I wanted to clarify that we're fully accounting for the congestion associated with the elementary school. It's just there's a recognition that the issues associated with the elementary school are not going to be solved by the study, but we're certainly accounting for all its effects on the corridor.
Are you saying that you won't compound that problem?
That's the intent.
Good intent. I hope you achieve it.
Yeah, I mean, just to expand on that, I mean, I think we are aware of the congestion issues. I think that is a factor in the evaluation of the alternatives is what effect will they have on the congestion and the challenges around the school, and then evaluate the pros and cons around that. So
how big a factor will it be?
Well, again, I do want to emphasize that we are in the section of roadway around the school, we aren't significantly changing auto flow. So the only modification to auto flow in that area is the proposed traffic circle at Bailey Ranch Road, which we're looking for community input on. Otherwise, we are not changing traffic flow east of Barn Rock. I'm
sure you have experience in models that deal with the interaction of congestion right next to a traffic circle. Does it typically result in gridlock?
Yes, I'm familiar with some of the challenges associated with that. Traffic circles sometimes can be challenged when there's a lot of congestion and backups, but they can also provide benefits by improving access to side streets at other times of day. I think that's just one of the trade-offs that we'll be sure to consider as we evaluate the traffic circle. We have alternatives with and without the traffic circle at this location, and I think we're really looking for community input on what concerns you see associated with the traffic circle, and we'll certainly, that'll be the predominant concern in terms of how to move forward.
As a member of the community, my input would be anything that makes the ability to leave or enter Bailey Ranch Road is deeply, deeply undesirable. It's already bad enough. And
we've had a number of comments.
Thank you.
About the traffic circling, their concern with the interface with the school congestion. So I think that's something that the design team will be looking at. We also had a question come in about, are there any stoplights proposed as part of the project?
No.
Oh, no, excuse me. I'm sorry. I read that wrong. One of the suggestions I made for safety improvement was increased street lights. I'm sorry, street lights. Will street lights be added in the plan?
Yes, so that's streetlights illumination wise along the corridor would be something that will be considered and included as we get further down the design aspect of the project.
Kelly, do we have any more hand raised?
Not at this time.
So we have, as I said, we have a number of statements that have come in on the question thing that will be, also shared with the design team, like people sort of endorsing comments and things that have already been made. And so because it's getting close to 8 and we want to be respectful, so you come back to our next meeting. If there's no more questions, as I said, I would encourage you to go to the website, take the survey. There's write-in opportunities in the survey. We've also provided some information where you can reach out to the city directly and sort of share your input. And we would love for you to chat with your neighbors about some of the things you've heard tonight, because once again, it's what you guys live there. We want to make a street that works for you. Does anybody else have any closing comments?
Yes, thank you, Lindy. I did want to reiterate that on the project website and on the survey, the information on how to contact the feedback email and phone number are shown there. So please feel free to send your comments and we will include them and share them with the team.
Thank you all for attending. We're really grateful for it. And have a pleasant evening and a good weekend.
We have one hand raised that just popped up.
Okay.
Natalie, do you still want to speak? You can unmute.
Sure. I know that I was told that this should be addressing the city council, but I just would like to have the people who are tuned in to look up the definitions of why streets and avenues and drives and boulevards, roadways, etc., are named that. And you will understand that Hayward Boulevard is not a boulevard. It's just food for thought. Okay, sayonara.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.